and we're good. We have a great marriage, but parenting, a lot of the stresses that, people walk through as you get older in life. And, it just was one of those eye-opening experiences where for the first time I realized and I understood why people just kind of drift apart.
Welcome to the Recovery Vow podcast. I'm your host, Eric Kennedy. Today's episode is brought to you by Dr. Rhonda Milner, Kendra Neal's Studio, Augusta Dream Center, and a special thank you to all of our other supporters of the Recovery Vow podcast. On today's episode of Recovery Vow podcast, I've got probably, I guess I would be considered your stunt double. It's like looking in the mirror right now. The most handsome man in Dallas, Texas. I have to keep a hat on or else people will be confused. Yeah, they may be confused. But Brent Evans, thank you for coming on the podcast, man. I say thank you for that, but let me say thank you also for believing in me when I came to you with an idea at a time where I felt like it was a next step for me to leave some kind of a legacy and do some kind of a project. And it was because of you and your dad that I'm able to put together Marriage After Addiction. You've set up a team, you've been encouraging, and you've helped me. So thank you for looking good, but thank you for the support and everything you've done to help me get where I'm at over this last year and a half.
It's an honor. When you start down a path with somebody, you meet somebody for the first time, everyone's, passionate about a project. They have big ideas, big dreams. They have something in their heart that they want to see come to fruition. I don't know that I've met anyone that has the work ethic, the heart, passion, all the right ingredients that from the very beginning, you didn't let off the gas. Like you've been like pushing consistently for this to be like out there, launching things. You're excited about it, but I've never really seen a moment where you kind of put a little, water on the fire. It seems like it's just continuing to rage, and it's exciting for me to see it because, we do what we do, publishing or helping with the content, but it really requires you to be a spokesperson and to be articulate in it. So from the book, from the podcast, I'm an exciting cheerleader for you. Like it's easy to cheerlead somebody who's not just talking the talk, but wants to walk the walk. So congrats on the book. The podcast is amazing. And even if you're out there, I don't know who you are out there listening to this. If you have even a laptop and a microphone, anyone can start a podcast, but to do it the way this man does it with the Southern charm and all the eloquency of, making people feel like talking about serious subjects can just be done in a warm way.
Yeah.
It's an important message from a really great man. So it's an honor to work with you. And
I'll pay you for that later. Like I got some money, I'll give you for that.
And I had to walk a long way to be on this podcast. So all the way from the second
downstairs. Hey, I want to talk about as much as you want to talk about, but I feel like people need to hear a little bit about your story. Like everybody knows your dad's Jimmy Evans, and that's great. But what got Brent to where you are and your ways of wanting to support how important marriages are today? So give me a little bit of background of how you got to where you are. If you want to share anything in your past that, you can relate to any kind of addiction, that's great. If not, don't worry about it. But, did you jump into this because you were called, or you feel like you just jumped into this because it was just teed up?
Yeah. Well, when your father is a part of something, sometimes it's natural to have a firsthand eyewitness view of the work he's doing. And I think the danger zone for me was, I never really wanted to be Jimmy Evans, speaker, pastor, preacher. But when I had some years in business, there was an opportunity to come on and kind of be part of the business side of the organization. And, when your last name is the same as the guy who started the organization, I think there's always this probably misunderstandings to some degree that it's just naturally going to be,
expected.
Yeah, expected, or the transitionary time at some point in time will be to the son. Yeah. That wasn't really designed that way up front. Probably even a little bit more against that. And I didn't necessarily want it either because I didn't want to be Jimmy Jr. But I really was just, I brought in the marketing and the branding side of what I loved to a world that didn't really always appreciate that kind of thing. So I felt like what my dad did was great. And what I offered was also good because in a world that really didn't care about the way logos or words on a page looked, I really was passionate about that. So from the very beginning, I tried to tailor things to be more palatable for the masses, and I think that helped to some degree in the worlds that we were in, for my dad to have somebody that had his back on the branding, marketing side. And then just naturally over time, I'm 47. I started here when I was 27.
Dang.
Over time, as any organization, you kind of constrict and then you grow. And over time, I just became, there were opportunities for me to step up leadership wise. And I'd be lying if I said my first thought was, I want to be the marriage guy out there. Like I wasn't really feeling like that same passion my dad had for couples and relationships. It's probably been the last 5 or 6 years where that passion he had transferred to me. And then Stephanie and I have been walking through probably one of the most, challenging seasons of our marriage the last 4 years and we're good. We have a great marriage, but parenting, a lot of the stresses that, people walk through as you get older in life. And, it just was one of those eye-opening experiences where for the first time I realized and I understood why people just kind of drift apart.
Yeah.
And they can kind of look at each other and go, I don't know that you're the same person I married 27 years ago.
That's what I was about to ask, because you and Stephanie have been together for 27 years.
27 years this March.
That's awesome, man.
So, and we have a great marriage, but it's just life can just really kind of take its toll on things. And I wouldn't say it's like anything. It wasn't, affairs or addictions. It was just a very stressful season where it just didn't feel like it ever let up. And so now I can firsthand, like that my dad doesn't have to be in the room, tell you how important marriage is, how important it is to fight for marriage, how important it is for the kids to fight for the marriage.
Yeah.
And how you're going to feel at some point in time like it makes a ton of sense to give up. And you got to have an inner thought that just basically says that's the dumbest thing you could possibly do. Even if there are reasons to throw it in, I would just say don't make an emotional decision, because you never know what God can do in those moments. So people have been divorced. I have a lot of friends that are divorced. A friend of mine just recently told his pastor, try asking how many people in your congregation on one weekend, just have them raise their hand, how many people are blended families. 80% of the congregation raised their hands.
Yeah.
And I said, if you ask the follow-up question, how many of the rest of the people know a blended family in their immediate family, they would all raise their hands, because it's so pervasive. So it's not about divorce. It's just about the commitment to a relationship that's going to have some ups and downs. And so I'm very passionate about that at XO. In this kind of next season of my life, I really do. I want to make marriage for young people relevant again, and I want to help those that are hurting in their relationships.
No, I totally get it. One thing that I'm not, I'm close to your age, but I have one kid that's in high school about to graduate. And I remember you told me, like, you set aside time, especially right now, because kids are going to graduate soon, and you've made that like a priority. Sometimes I feel like as a dad and as a husband, I get so wrapped up in, and maybe it's my Enneagram, maybe it's my addictive personality, whatever, like my thing. I have to keep driving the train with my thing. You mentioned all the things that I do, but I want to be known also for the things that I do for my wife and my kids.
Mm-hmm.
We build these things. We think we're doing it for them. And we are, and we want the recognition for it as a leader, but that was just one thing I remember that stuck out that you told me, was how important it was to just be present with your children, especially as you're going through this season.
Mm-hmm.
And I've met your wife, and I think you guys are fantastic. I would say that I would probably face something at some point where I've always heard from my pastor, Marty Baker. He said you're either going into something, you're in something, or you're coming out of something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true,
Mm-hmm.
and so just how you handle it and how you fight for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I know that you and I have connected over the last year and a half. We met years ago, but just really over this last year and a half, we've connected and talked about, vision and things like that. Where are you with XO right now? Where do you, how do you want to reach that younger crowd that we're talking about?
Yeah. It's a great question. And this is probably, if time stamp this podcast would be one of those times where I am embarking on really a new journey. Every day feels completely different and new in a fun way. I would say that I'm excited about everything that we're doing here. It's just completely different. So you talk about an organization that was essentially a pulpit ministry, television based.
Mm-hmm.
The founder was an articulate, dynamic communicator with gobs of content. I haven't said the word gobs in a long time, but it felt.
What does gob mean?
I don't know. Gobsmackingly crazy amount of content. So there's just so much that Jimmy Evans built in his personality, and people would show up to our conferences or they'd watch TV because of Jimmy Evans. And then we added other voices. That was part of the shift that I kind of helped create with XO, other voices to the conferences, to our podcast lineup, to our publishing arm. You have all these voices, these personalities that are kind of all the driving force behind how we acquire people. But I would say pretty much without exception, 100% of them were either pastors or were very much, non-denominational, charismatic, in church worlds. And it felt, very narrow in how we reach people. Like you can reach people if you go to this church and you have this speaker and that'll draw this crowd. And then if you try and take that anywhere else, it just doesn't work.
Doesn't land well. Because
it's just so specific in how it's addressing the problems in relationships. I 100% believe that Jesus Christ is the answer for, a life that's misdirected. I have a personal testimony. I was a knucklehead. I wouldn't say I was an alcoholic, but I was alcoholic adjacent in my college years. I was a wild child, but I gave my life back to Christ in 19. It was my own personal salvation. And, I still committed to doing Christ-like things.
You made a vow.
I'm not perfect. Yeah, you make a commitment to something, and you can walk away from your faith, but I don't think Jesus ever walks away from us. But again, I think that's awesome if you find somebody that is ready to receive Christ, be on fire, and change their life. Not everyone's there, and not everyone is really destined to be Baptist or Presbyterian or Methodist or non-denominational. Some people are very, very good people in the Catholic community, or they're still on their faith journey. They haven't found really where they're supposed to be yet, but they have a committed relationship with another, opposite sex individual. They may have kids involved. How am I going to help their relationship?
Right.
And so the big idea right now is, how do we kind of take what we've built and reformulate everything so that we can be a little bit more obviously a resource for younger people in the ways that they can, and all that's brand new. Yeah. So there's nothing that we're doing right now. Like even your podcast is new. Like like pretty much all of the things that we're working on. I'm trying to touch, marriage in different places that can kind of become the future of the organization. But a lot of the newer podcasts that we're starting will be, really probably not even understandable for someone over 40. Yeah. Like I'm not making the content for me. I'm making it for my 17-year-old daughter. Yep. Or, how old's your high school son?
17.
17. So I was married when I was 20. In the next few years, our kids will be dating, hopefully going through pre-marriage classes, getting married. But the information that they're receiving, especially on social media, is so wrong oftentimes. Yeah. And they're listening to, there's some YouTuber named Queso. Have you heard of Queso?
Not young enough for that yet.
So it's not even spelled like the Mexican cheese. It's a guy named Case. It's Caseoh. And my kids were calling each other Queso the other day, or this was about 6 months ago. I was like, don't call him that. Queso, like the Mexican cheese. I was like, why are you calling him Queso? And he's like, no, it's a YouTuber. And I had to look it up. But, it's like these people, this guy's like 3 million, subscribers on YouTube, and he's very influential for creating content that people are watching, gaming content or whatever it is. So young people, they're just engaged in a media style with personalities that we've never heard of, but they are affecting the culture, and they really are. Like there are opportunities there for younger people to be educated in relationships, but you kind of have to weave it into a lot of the content that they're absorbing, and you can't just go out there and just start with the marriage message. Like,
Right.
you need to be married. You need to be married to one person, and you got to wait to have sex before marriage. That's just not. It's just not resonating with young
That's
people.
the best case scenario, but you're right. I mean, so what you just said, I mean, there's generations. How many generations do you think that are behind you and I, 45, 47? I mean, is it all of the 30s, all of the 20s, the 30-somethings that are out there?
Every baby born this year is generation beta.
No, I didn't know that.
I think from 2025 and 2039, it'll be generation beta. I would not want to be a part of generation beta.
No, I'm happy to be in the 70s.
My
Gen X.
Fifth grader is generation alpha. There's a generation alpha right now, followed Gen Z.
Yeah.
Gen X is the place to be.
That's exactly where you want to be at. We experienced some of the greatest times ever.
Yeah. So the young people. So that's one part of it. So a media company kind of geared more for young artists, and then there's a whole other part of the organization that we are building upon the foundations that we have, which is kind of more the institute side of what we have, which is helping hurting couples. We have a phenomenal organization for helping couples in crisis with a really great success rate. So we're talking 1 and 2 day intensives that we do here in our offices. We're also having a network of people certified to do that across the country, coaching calls, crisis calls for people that are hurting. And then we're doing education. So our building here, we have classrooms. We'll be doing workshops, vision retreat weekends here, really building out our institute side to facilitate ongoing education, pre-marriage classes for people getting married, but just a lot of help for couples.
Yeah.
And that's all very entrenched in the value system, biblical worldview, value system that we've always had about how faith has to be a cornerstone of your relationship. But if somebody walks in off the street and they're Mormon or they're Catholic or whatever, we don't shame them.
Right.
We want them to be here, and we won't make them subscribe. You don't have to sign a statement of belief, but they're going to hear the importance of why we do what we do. And the tools for relationships that we have they're biblical, but they're not entrenched solely to the point where you have to memorize scripture to be helpful. We're teaching couples how to resolve their conflicts and get better. And I apologize about the couch in the podcast studio today.
Are you serious? No, I'm just getting adjusted.
You good?
I'm settling in to hear this. I mean, I really am. I'm here for it because the thing is you have to, like, how did people reach you and I when we were in the 90s? Like
MTV. Oh.
I mean, really, there was. How did they didn't? We had to fend for ourselves, and if the information is at hand, we had to be the information that's at hand. And I like what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I like that you're getting it to where it's open for people of different ages, especially the younger crowd. One of our friends, Daniel Van, drew it on a piece of paper for me yesterday and explained exactly what you're saying. There's a generation, let's say this is horizontal line, and then there's this dash, and there's this generation of married couples throughout their whole marriage that you guys have played a part in. But then there's that line and that leading up to, and I brought it up to Daniel, I'm so glad I'm not single out there in the world right now, because you meet somebody and then you're talking to them and then you're kind of dating and then you're dating and then you're exclusive. And then at some point, it could be 1 year, it could be 10 years, of dating this person, you get engaged or whatever. All that in between there, that scares the crap out of me. Like it's just too much. Like when I went out with my wife, we went out to the movies, we went out to dinner. And in Augusta, there's this you can charter a plane for $100 and it just takes you up over the city.
Look at you.
Yeah, man, I was going all out. Okay. But when I got home that night, I went straight to Facebook and I said, in a relationship, click, because I felt like
you can't do that now.
You can't do that then. I mean, that was 10 years ago.
She called you out?
She broke up with me.
Oh, wow.
But I didn't know. And so it's not that I need to be educated in that, but I needed to learn from that. Like, that's just not how it works today. Or even then. So, I've had people come on the podcast today, and this girl, she's young, she's in recovery, but she's married, and she's 33, I think, and she has a belief in a higher power and all that, but she wants to be fed, and she wants her marriage to be fed because she believes in that. But she has a past, and she still wants to reach that audience. She's like an influencer, and I don't think she's scared of being proud of that, finding that higher power or needing help in her marriage. But I could tell that they would benefit from it.
Mm-hmm.
And so how, you finding them right where they are, or giving them a place to come here at XO headquarters, I think that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
The education side of where this is going. So what does 2025 look like for, can you tell us what XO looks like in 2025? You going to cast vision?
Yeah. So I don't know when this is going to air, but we're essentially, putting a mile marker with our conferences and sunsetting those this year. So this February will be our last conferences that we do. And we're shifting. So starting this year, we'll have more experiential micro events in our office. I mentioned Vision Retreat weekends. So bringing couples here in smaller groups with higher touch point, higher interactivity, opportunity to set vision for your finances, for your sex life, for your communication, for your kids, and really be able to dial into a more personalized, approach for a lot of these people. At our conferences, we do breakout sessions. We were on a panel together for a breakout session. That was highly, that was well surveyed afterwards. People liked that session. But, you can only answer so many questions. We had limited amount of time. And, the breakout sessions just scratch the surface. But if we have smaller events here, we could do a whole, day or two just talking about that subject and bringing people in and educating them and doing a recovery vow sort of workshop and, help couples. And you just can't do that at a big conference.
Yeah.
And so we're shifting this year to more of that micro event strategy and bringing in experts to teach and train couples. And then we're rolling out our coaching program. So we're going to have opportunities for couples to get monthly coaching calls with our mediation team. And these are people that are certified, they're experts. And this is not counseling. So counseling, I think for a lot of people, they think that for marriage. This is coaching. So like I use this as a practical example. If you're a part of the XO Institute, you're connected to the coaching program, you just went through the holidays, you dealt with in-law issues, kid issues, blended family issues, and the coach is there to help you kind of navigate the stress and teach and train you how to resolve these conflicts every month that come up. And counseling is care, coaching is more teaching and training. And there's an enormous need for that right now for couples that don't necessarily want to sit and spill, all of their, father wounds or, dealing with certain things. That there is a place for that.
Yeah.
And even our intensives, we really try and point to experts for addiction recovery. If somebody's in an active affair, addiction, or abuse situation, we won't talk to them until they've gone through a program that helps get that resolved.
Yeah.
Because the last thing you want to do is try and resolve that.
Yeah, you can't. That's a lot to cover and a lot to carry.
Yeah.
And that's just not what mediation is, right?
That would absorb the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And so the other spouse just they feel like they're not getting anywhere because the problem needs to be resolved. To be fair to the spouse that's either being abused or that's not in the addiction side or it's not in the affair, that just eats up the whole time.
Yeah. And
it doesn't heal the marriage the way it should be. So there are experts that deal with that. And so we always encourage couples. Affairs are probably the most tricky because a lot of times affairs cause tremendous pain and chaos. And, sometimes they can be long term. Sometimes they can be one-off. That's probably the one that we can navigate a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But even that, you talk about trust issues and violation and just how that can erupt in the process. It's really dangerous.
Kristen and I did the mediation. Well, we had mediation training, but before we did that, we actually went through the process, and we didn't have anything going on in our marriage at the time. We just had to kind of do the process to see what we were going to be learning about. And even though we didn't have anything going on, I tell you what I loved about it is that she had to write me a love letter and I had to write her a love letter. And then we read it to each other in front of the mediator. And it was just like a solid reminder that this is my wife. And even though we have anything going on, we got to talk about the first time we met, the day that I knew that I fell in love with her. She shared the same thing. I think it was something generational about family or whatever, but it gave us that opportunity. Just, we would never sit down and do that unless we were told. And so it opened the door. And then learning just to have conversation. We still do this today. I mean, it's a little bit of a jab, but it's not, because it's kind of funny at the end of the conversation. But we need to part ways. It's time, like we have to go separate and then we come back together.
Yeah, it's important.
It is. I mean, and we've done that, and it has helped our marriage, because we used to, like, early on, not like fights, but like arguments would get worse and worse and worse because we wouldn't just separate. We didn't have like a code word like, Franks and beans, it's time to pause, or microwave, like walk away. And so now we actually do have that. We use that for mediation. And then, being mediators, we've talked to several couples, but it's always been important to know the balance of the addiction, the abuse, and the adultery. And, don't walk in that. We went through a 2.5 day training here that did not make us counselors. It made us mediators of how to open the door for people to have communication. Just kind of circling back to, coming here a year and a half ago, I pitched the idea of this book, it wasn't even Marriage After Addiction, and it was called I Do Recover, or Recovery, it was something else. And, I think it was important to all of us to talk to the supporting spouse. And everybody that has come on the Recovery Vow before, if they are married, Paige today with Till the Wheels Fall Off, she was like, there was nothing there for me. And it was extremely selfish because it was all about him. And it could be vice versa. It could have been the female, I had a female today that she was in recovery, but she wasn't married, so I couldn't talk to her husband. But this is important, that we won't fix every marriage. We won't fix every marriage when it comes to addiction, but now they have something that they can, go through practically with this workbook. And I'm proud of it. And I hope that every marriage gets something from it that uses it. I don't think it'll make it worse. I do believe that, and I think that's where I get confidence.
No, I'm proud to have it too. I mean, there was a situation recently. I've talked to two people recently where you think, and this is just my dumb mind, you think addiction recovery. I always think of AA, some guy with a paper bag and chugging alcohol in the street corner, and that's just because I grew up in a generation where typically that was what most people were struggling with, was alcohol. And that's the recovery programs I thought of was bunch of donuts on a table, some coffee, and you go listen and go through, hi, I'm Brent Evans and I'm an alcoholic. That's the whole mindset I had. And then I had a buddy that was going through sex addiction, and it's the same thing as alcohol, except completely different set of, fundamentals to set up safeguards and have sober periods. But with, sex addiction, it's not just going and having affairs, it's pornography, it's all these other things. That's really a challenge for people that whenever you talk about somebody having a sex addiction, it's just as bad as somebody who has an alcohol addiction, who wakes up and all they think about is alcohol. And then you talk about drugs, like illegal drugs, but then now the problem is that there's prescription drugs. So young people are being prescribed Adderall, and Adderall is a huge problem because Adderall changes people's behavior. And I've talked to two people that the male, the husband, is the one struggling. And in the one case, they were already divorced. This girl was on my podcast, the Real Thing podcast, and it was she was talking about how she was in her 20s, married. Her husband was on Adderall, got worse and worse and worse with his consumption of it. Yeah, got abusive, angry, changed his whole personality. And the same thing happened to a friend of mine's daughter, who's married to a guy, and he went to rehab for it, trying to get better, but he was escalating. And so much so that you're fearing for your life because the drug is changing the behavior. And this is something that your doctor prescribes you. So it's not the same thing. Sometimes in thinking about it. So I sent him your book.
Did you really?
Yeah. I was proud
That's
to have
awesome.
it because she didn't have the addiction.
Yeah.
Her husband was in, recovery, and I don't know what's going to happen afterwards because this is fairly recent. But she needs a resource to kind of just even give her some sort of hope that I can walk through this process not feeling alone or like it's all about him or her. Like I said, these days it cuts both ways.
Yeah. And I think a natural network will happen too, where she may come to the website or to some kind of a say social media platform for Recovery Vow, and she'll connect with another mom or another wife that's gone through the same thing. That's the beauty in it too, is just like organically it'll grow on its own. And I think that's important. Yeah.
It's important. So what you're doing, the work you're doing is great. At least it gives some awareness to the community that's out there that is facing the same thing. Yeah. That you do feel, I would sense that, except for like those that are in the Alcoholic Anonymous, the AA programs, that kind of meet every week. I think a lot of people feel alone, isolated.
They do.
So just bringing awareness to it, the podcast, everything you're doing, it's really crazy the world we live in, but it just through channels that we didn't have growing up just brings a lot of life. Yeah.
When we talk about mediation, and the 3 A's before people can get to mediation, is there one that's worse than the other in the eyes of this marriage world that you're working in? Is like abuse higher than adultery, or is adultery higher than addiction, or which one do you see coming through the doors of mediation where they get turned away?
I guess abuse is a funny word because it can mean a lot of different things. Yeah. I don't know sometimes, and we talked about this before the podcast about cursing versus profanity. I don't know sometimes if it's not worse to be mentally and emotionally and spiritually abused versus physically abused.
Mm-hmm. I'm guilty of that. I think I've said things to my wife before that was probably too harsh in tone.
Yeah. And you can hit somebody and they can heal. You can say something to somebody and it never heals. Mm-hmm. And it changes their behavior, in an environment where you have an abusive situation, the abuser is trying to control. And through force of hand or force of words, they just want control. Yep. Sometimes they're narcissistic. Sometimes they just, were raised wrong and they have wounds themselves. But at the end of the day, that in my mind is a challenge. Yeah. Because how do you trust somebody that has that kind of, like, addiction is one thing. Because if somebody's struggling with substance abuse or gambling or whatever it is, you can look at the problem and go, if we can just resolve that, we'll be good. But when you have somebody that's really cruel and evil with their words, I'm not talking about just random, like, I've said dumb things to my wife that I regret. I'm talking
everybody's guilty of that.
I'm talking about, like,
even on a Christian level, like, I've heard it.
Yeah.
They just regret things because they weren't kind,
Yeah. It just messes with them. But again, the person that's doing it is doing it. Sometimes it's subconscious and they're just doing it because they don't know they're trying to be controlling, but they just do. But ultimately in a marriage relationship, I'm talking about intimacy, like when you come down to the basis of how do we now repair something that has been damaged so crazily to a subatomic level. Yeah. To a cellular level, you're just, how do I even talk to trust you? That's really challenging. I think with affairs, again, every situation is different. I think there's just trust issues, and that if you can get couples into the room, because a lot of times the spouse that's been cheated on, they're done. Yeah, I'm done. But if you can get them into the room and they're willing to work on it, that's even got hope to it. I'd say the abuse side is, for me, would be the one where you have to really navigate some challenging waters.
Yeah. Well, and there'll be maybe some classes that these couples will hear that this is where they can come to and come be a part of something where there's other couples that's going through the same thing. I know for me, when I was getting clean in recovery, if I heard other people's testimonies, and that's why I love doing a podcast, is because I can share the platform for people to share their story. If I can see a connection through somebody else that's gone through it, then it'll just energizes me to want to be a part of that. So having the education side of things here for other couples to meet other couples that are dealing with the same thing, even a small setting like the classroom, there's something to that, you know?
Yeah.
And
there's space for like all of us. I mean, there's so many great people out there doing marriage stuff. XO has got a purpose and a calling, and God's given me a vision and us resources to do certain things. It is too big of a world and too big of a problem out there.
Yeah.
The need is great to not work together. And so I want to champion other people out there doing the work. For us, I really want to make a difference going forward of seeing young people educated in relationships and seeing existing marriages, not choose divorce.
Yeah. And I think you will. I love what you're doing, man. I support it. And I'm glad to be.
Would you tell me otherwise?
Yeah, I would.
Would you
I feel like we're close enough that I could say, you know what, I'm not going to be a part of this, or I am going to be a part of this, but I love what you're doing. And I want to be a part of it, because there is going to be one couple that if I did all of what I'm doing to support you and what I'm doing, if I reach one couple, then I did the work I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
When I prayed for, the word legacy, 2 years ago during 21 days of prayer, it was like I'm supposed to do something. I didn't know what that something was, but God's been just opening the door. I would absolutely tell you if it didn't line up. I mean, I'm close enough to you to tell you that.
Yeah.
But I do want to just wrap it up. All right, so I got something fun I usually do, and I'm going to do it with you. We don't have to use it. I hope we do use it, because this is going to kind of put you out there. It's going to humble you a little bit. But I got a rapid fire question situation here.
Okay,
you okay with that?
Okay, yeah, I'm great.
All right, 6 questions, and you got to answer as fast as you can. Person you would trade places with for one day.
What's my time on this?
You got 3 seconds left. It's rapid. It's as fast as you can.
Morgan Wallen.
Okay. What's a guilty pleasure?
Chess.com.
Oh my God. Best chess?
I'm addicted to chess. If we're talking about addiction and recovery,
I got a book I'll give you on that.
Yeah. Just find me on chess.com.
Okay. Best compliment you've ever gotten?
I think it was just a few hours ago. You complimented me. Geez, I hate these kind of questions.
Good, that's why I'm doing it.
Best compliment that I've ever been given. I'm stalling. I'm rewatching all these old movies with my kids. So we watched Billy Madison the other day, and he had to spell the word couch. C-O-U-R. You going to the mall later? So I'm just stalling. No, we're not going to the mall. Let's finish. Okay. Best compliment. Man, it's hard.
Best compliment you ever been given?
I think anytime somebody compliments my my brain, I feel good about that.
Perfect.
I want to be known as somebody that has some level of smartness.
Well, I mean, you followed that with after saying that you play chess, so that makes sense.
That's stupid. Yeah, I'm an idiot. I'm a nerd too. My wife thinks I'm a nerd.
Worst piece of advice you've ever been given?
Worst piece of advice I've ever been given: put it all on the Dallas Cowboys.
That's tough. Something you wish you were better at?
Golf.
I've seen your golf game.
Crickets.
What will always... No, you're a great golfer.
I'm not a great golfer.
I
wasn't looking for that.
You're
but I wasn't as bad as possibly in your mind I could have been. And actually wasn't too bad.
No, you weren't. You were pretty good that day. What will always make you smile, Brent Evans?
Geez, what is this? What is this segment?
Yeah.
Well, always make me smile.
Just reality. Just a little realness thrown in here.
Stephanie and I love great senses of humor, so we have certain things that we love to laugh at. But sarcasm is my love language. So anytime there's a great bit of sarcasm in the room, I'm very happy. I always smile at that.
Yeah. Man, I love you. I appreciate you coming on the Recovery Vow podcast. I appreciate you letting me record here at the studio. Everybody that walked through the door today, they were so complimentary of the space, how fancy everything is, the building, everything. So, again, thank you for that. Thank you for the belief in me in this book, and thank you for allowing me to just reach people right where they are.
Eric Kennedy. He's got a famous last name. Are you related to the Kennedys?
Checkmate. Nope. I have lied.
You can't cash it on that anywhere?
No, I'll be honest with you. I was drunk in Ketchikan, Alaska one time, and I got in a cab, and I told this Eskimo lady, she was, there's nothing to do in Alaska but drink. And I was hammered, and she said, "Are you related to John F. Kennedy?" Yes, I am. Don't you feel good? And now I don't know what happened to her, but I don't know why I lied about that.
Why didn't we start with this story? This is a great story.
We can edit that. I mean, we can put it at the beginning.
No, I'm just saying like this. I want to, hold on.
If I told you every drunk story, every funny drunk story, man, we could sit here for hours.
But yeah, I've got some funny drunk stories too. And I don't think that would be helpful for your audience, but it would be entertaining.
A lot of people.
It would be entertaining.
Yeah.
No, that's great. It's an honor to be on the show, and I appreciate you raising the flag for XO too, and what we're doing here. But yeah, I'm a big cheerleader. So
thanks, B. Appreciate you, buddy. Thanks for watching and listening to the Recovery Vow podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe and follow along on all of our social media platforms. A huge shout out to all of our sponsors. You can find a list of them in the show notes below or on the screen you're watching on our YouTube channel. We'll see you next week. Today's episode is brought to you by Newsom Electric, New Spring Church, Augusta Lawn and Turf, Candace Riddle Realty, Gold Neck, Norval Fixture and Equipment, S&S Supplies, Belinda Thompson, Rhett Walker, Carpet Cleaning Pros of Augusta, Coleman Construction, Bagwell Insurance, Tree Guys with Ties, Barrow Walden, Kendrick Paint and Body, Roof Savers, Game Changers, City of Refuge, Augusta Magazine, Burrow Elijah Attorney at Law, Communigraphics, The Nonprofit Desk, Corbin Jones State Farm, Paradise Turf, Sally Kohler Photography, Atlas Health and Wellness. And a special thank you to all of our other supporters of the Recovery Vow podcast.